everyone. Welcome back to episode 24 of Liquid Leaky Podcast. I'm your host, Karl. With me always, my co-host, Taylor. Taylor, you're looking mighty good these days. Look like you're fresh off of some major athletic feat.
Yes, yeah, I did. I did my first sprint triathlon of the year. Even wore the T-shirt down at Deer Creek State Park. Yeah, wow. Fancy, huh?
Yeah.
They give you a T-shirt. I should be better about it. They have this option always to like skip the T, plant a tree. There's even like a nice catchy little phrase. And I was like, no, I always want the T-shirt. Like, I feel like I worked really hard for the T-shirt.
Seriously, can't we do both?
Yeah, like can't we not? Yeah, I'll pay a little extra to plant the tree. I don't know what to do. It's fine. Oh man, I just want the T-shirt. They give you a medal and stuff too, but I mean, you don't walk around wearing the medal, right? Like that's kind of weird. If I just walked into the store, you know.
So I'm not making any judgments on our audience, but I'm wondering if many people may not be familiar with what a sprint triathlon is, given that most of us sit for a living. So could you explain what that is?
Yes, a sprint triathlon is basically for people that hate themselves and they want to put themselves through a bunch of different events. No, not really. So I have to trick myself into doing cardio, and this is the best way that I could do it. I applaud people who can just run or just bike and they find that super enjoyable and uplifting, but I feel like I need different things, otherwise I just get super bored. And so it's been helpful. So a triathlon consists of 3 different events: swimming, cycling, biking, and then running. And the sprint is the shorter distance. Usually when you say triathlon, people think, oh, like Ironman, right? And it's like, no, like I did not do an Ironman. I would be, oh man, I don't know that I could finish an Ironman even. But a sprint relates to the distance, and so it is a 750 meter swim, a 20-kilometer bike ride. Is that right? I always get the kilometers things messed up. And then it ends on a 5K run. So you kind of just, you start in the water, and then you transition to the bike, and then you transition to the run after that. And so it's pretty intense. My first one, I did it in like an hour and 57 minutes. My goal was to finish. This was last year, and then my stretch goal was to get under 2 hours, and so I hit both of those. This year, this one was at a different event. So down at Deer Creek, it's a lot more flat than where I was at in Akron area, and so So in addition to hopefully my fitness improving, but also like just different terrain, I did this one in an hour and 39 minutes.
Whoa!
So big drop, but again, some of that's terrain, some of it's training. I'll take the win though on the training. So yeah, that is what a sprint triathlon is.
So it might have all been due to the terraining. There? No. Okay.
It was right there. I knew you were going to go for it.
Here's what always gets me about these. Is it always that order? Because I would much rather have the swim at the end, because you're hot, you're sweaty, you don't want to like have a wet swimsuit when you start your run and chafe. I don't know. Just why do they do that first?
This is going to make it sound more dangerous than it is, or whatever. But the reason they have the swim at first is because the swim is the most dangerous event. So they have kayakers in the water to help people with the swim. But you're swimming in like throngs of people, right? And so people are like swimming over top of you some instances. Sometimes you're getting kicked. And it's not intentional. It's just everyone's racing, and you kind of think of it as a group of runners, but you're in the water, so you have a lot less mobility, like your ability to like pay attention and move around. And so, especially like with people, they don't want people to be super tired getting into the water as the last leg of the event. Every other right. If you're cycling or you're running, like if you get tired, you hop off the bike and you walk for a little bit. If you're running, you just slow down from a run to a walk. In swimming, you drown, right? You can't just,
I like it. There's a couple options. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have kayakers in the water that like if they actually had a couple people at this one. The first one I did, no issues, but there were a couple people in the water this time that I don't know, just something happened, and either they panicked or maybe some kind of a medical condition or something, but they had to like stop swimming and call a kayak over to come help a person so they could just like hold on and get them to shore and stuff. Which really stinks, probably, to go through all that training and then the very first event just being out. Like that would be rough. I would be so mad. Yeah. So mad.
Do they get a T-shirt?
Like, no. They give you the T-shirt before. So actually, this T-shirt doesn't even mean that I finished. The medal is for finishing. The T-shirt is just for showing up. So
nice.
But But yeah, so it's
Wow.
but I do get that. It would be nice. I actually this time around, like at the transition from the bike to the run, I just had a extra bottle of water just to dump. It's like ice water just to dump all over myself to try to like cool myself down. But it also was a little bit cooler, or whatever. You text me that morning. You're like, that was the swim was probably pretty. I don't even remember what you said or whatever, but the water was a little bit colder. So which I actually thought was really nice. But again, you're moving and stuff like that or whatever. Like I'll sweat in the pool. It's weird when you get out of the pool and you're just like sweating when I'm swimming laps or whatever during the week. That's really weird. But yeah,
that's really weird. Well, congratulations. That's a big accomplishment, especially having a young family and being so busy with Shopify. Which, for those of you tuning in, this is actually a Shopify podcast.
That's what we do.
Did not transition to a sports podcast.
This is not a triathlon podcast, or no. But it's important as developers at a certain point to prioritize your health to some degree, right? Like even though we sit at keyboards and type, there's stuff that you do when you're not typing, and so finding something that you enjoy doing, some of it's walking, right, and those sorts of things too.
Yeah,
stay mobile is good for you. So.
It really is. I'm just super impressed. Like, I've been trying to do more walking over the winter, so I got that desk treadmill I think I mentioned previously. You can see the desk back there. Treadmill's under it. Focus at home. Anyway, almost immediately I got an ingrown toenail, and then I've had issues on and off with plantar fasciitis. So it's like, man, you just, it's hard to move sometimes. And you got to keep at it because you want to stay healthy, especially as you get older. Those of you listening, I don't know yet firsthand, but I hear that you want to build as much muscle as you can in like your 30s and 40s. As you go in like your 50s and 60s, that base is kind of there. It's harder, I hear, to build it up after the fact. So, you got to think long term about this stuff, and you're doing a good job with that. So.
Yeah, and for me, my biggest goal is just, I want to be one of those dads that can keep up with my kids to some degree, right? I don't want to be able to, get winded just throwing the football in the backyard or something, Like,
yeah,
that always sounds terrible to me. So, yeah, definitely invest in your health.
Exactly. Yeah, I've been thinking about it. I drink, far too many Diet Cokes every day, and it's on the back of my mind. I keep getting headaches, and I want to go to the doctor, but I know the first thing I'm going to say is, like, you should stop drinking so much Diet Coke. Like, no.
Just quit that for a little bit, Just test it out, We all have
to have a single vice.
Yeah, just the one. Is it a single vice though, Carl? That's so it's
the only thing in my life that I would say is out of parameter, yeah.
So that's my, I love ice cream, so that's why I have to run apparently. So, that would be my vice. I just sit down and just kill a whole thing of ice crean. That's why I can't buy it at home. I'll just eat the whole thing.
Struggle's real.
It is a serving size for me, so. That's a big old tub of ice cream. Hey, you want to talk about, that's a little bit of life work. I mean, I guess I'll go. That was kind of my big thing as far as like big life stuff since we last got to record the triathlon. So we also, I'll tell a funny little anecdote with it,
please,
if that's part of it, too. So related to the triathlon, it was at this state park, right? Deer Creek State Park. You're familiar? It's not far from you.
I saw it. And got a T-shirt with it, yeah.
And so. Decided to go ahead and camp down there because it is about almost 2 hours from where I live in Ohio. And so rather than stay in a hotel...
I'm just going to stop you, Taylor. The only thing worse than running a triathlon is camping right afterwards. Like, what were you thinking?
No, it was camping the night before and afterwards. I did both. So the thought was, so in the summer, like we try to just like drive on like Saturdays or Sundays or whatever, spend a couple hours at like local lakes and stuff like that. The kids love it. We get to hang out and just enjoy the day and stuff like that when we don't have other things going on. And so the beach down there at Deer Creek State Park was supposed to be really nice. And so we're like, all right, let's just camp down there. I'll do the triathlon and then we'll spend the day at the lake. And so we get down there and, you're familiar with the area and the weekend. It rained all Saturday night. So that was exciting. And so we did that. Thankfully, I was able to set the tent up before it rained. And so at least we didn't setting a tent up in the rain is like the worst thing ever. We're having to take it down either. Both are terrible. But like thankfully it was dry when we started. We got all set up, got settled, and so it didn't start until probably like 8, 9 o'clock that night. It really started to rain, started to come down. But my wife and I kept getting woken up because it sounded like somebody was like walking around like our tent area, and so it's like really weird. And so I just keep popping up or whatever, and I kept thinking I heard someone kind of getting into our stuff, and I was like, this is super weird. Like, what the heck is going on? And so, I even popped out a couple of times from the tent. I'm looking around. You've got other campers and campsites next to you,
Sure.
or what have you. And I'm like, I'm trying to sleep. Okay, I have a triathlon that I have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning so I can get in and register by 5:45. And so, anyways, a couple of times, finally pop out this one time and see this big old raccoon take off deeper into the woods. And we're like, oh no, because like a couple of times I could have sworn I heard the cooler. Our cooler with all of our food and stuff like that open and close, and so I thought someone was just like messing with us, or like the drunk people in the camp next to us or whatever were stumbling over trying to get some sandwiches or something or whatever, and
in the rain at night.
Come find out. And so we're just like, what the heck? And so anyways, ended up just moving, 3 o'clock in the morning, wife and I just like got up, moved all of our food and everything into our truck and stuff like that. That's parked at our campsite or whatever. Went back to sleep, slept great the rest of the night. Okay. Woke up the next day. The 2 hours I had left. So woke up the next day, and whatever, just focus on the triathlon, do the triathlon, come back. And so we're starting to pack up all of our stuff to go to the lake and stuff like that. We packed a bunch of these, like, those little frozen peanut butter sandwiches, Uncrustables.
Okay. Yeah.
Had a bunch of those for the kids just because they're real easy. We had like a foot-long sub that we had bought at the store that we just like threw in the cooler. And it's all gone. Like,
oh no!
This raccoon like lived high on the hog with us or whatever, and like ate like half of the food that we brought. That was the exciting part of it. I really didn't think about having to worry about that because it was in this like big heavy cooler with the lid that closed with a latch and stuff like that.
Oh,
and
man.
Apparently these raccoons are pretty smart and we're able to figure out how to navigate that. And so we were robbed by a couple of raccoons, maybe perhaps a band of raccoons. I'm not really sure if it was just one or one working in cahoots with several of them, but they made off with a bunch of food. And so my kids were peanut butter and jelly Uncrustable-less during our lake day, but it was fine. We got them some cookies and chips and stuff like that, and they were totally happy with that. They couldn't care less. So
you're perpetrating obesity in the raccoon community at Deer Creek. So really, you're apparently harming nature. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. It was not something I intended to do, so I apologize to the Deer Creek State Park community. Yeah, I didn't plant the tree, and I'm fattening up all these raccoons. Who knows, Taylor. Man? I'm sure they were littering too because they made off with a whole bunch of stuff. I'm sure those raccoons did not clean up after themselves. So, and the next night they got mad at us because we had all of our food packed up ahead of time. So they ended up. We had a trash bag too, like hung up pretty high. They tore all of that. Like went through everything, just scattered it all across the camp. They were very upset that we had locked up our food that night. So. That was the exciting part of the triathlon adventure. So the triathlon all went well as I expected, as I'd hoped and trained for and stuff like that. But all the stuff surrounding it or whatever, like between the rain and the raccoons, like it was a lot. It was a lot. So
it's no joke.
Yeah. So yeah,
I'm glad you survived.
My super long anecdote about that. Yes, I'm glad I survived too. Really happy with my time, and glad the raccoons only took sandwiches. So
yeah, I've also got some raccoon stories to share. I won't go into them now, but if you're gonna go camping, lesson learned, guys. Don't trust your food. Between bears and raccoons and whatever else is out there, drunken campers, right? Put it in your car, lock it up, or hey, better yet, just don't go camping. That's kind of where I'm getting from this. So, get a room like a civilized person. Sorry, I know some of you guys are super into hardcore camping. That's great.
So I love camping.
Go do that. Yeah.
Yep. My wife is the same as you. Camping is at a hotel. So that's how you camp.
Which is funny because I would consider myself an outdoorsy kind of guy. I like the outdoors, like being in the outdoors. But when it comes time for bed, it's like, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Sleep is important. So
Anyway,
well, we're like the halfway between. Like we're not hardcore campers. As in. Like, we have a tent, but, like, we bring a freaking queen-size air mattress that gets blown up in the tent. Like, we have an 8-person tent for 4 people. So, like, the kids have their own air mattress that they share. We have a queen-size, like, elevated air mattress that we blow up inside. So, like, it's practically partway between what's that fancy camping term?
Glamping.
Glamping, yeah. It's whatever's between camping and glamping is what we do.
Glamping is where it's at. I'll just leave it there. So Shopify. Today we should probably talk about Shopify stuff, and
that makes sense.
I haven't done anything interesting in my life, so I'll just give my little update. But in terms of Shopify work here, I've been working on, guess what? A store migration from BigCommerce to Shopify, which those of you joining us early on in the podcast, you might have a little bit of deja vu because the same thing happened to me last summer. And it's like, oh boy, what am I getting myself into again? Luckily, all the work I did last summer, for those that haven't tried it before, I discovered that if you're coming out of BigCommerce, if you're going into Shopify, Matrixify, which is an app you can purchase, is probably the best tool path in terms of getting that data into Shopify. However, there is enough difference between how the data comes out of BigCommerce and what Matrixify expects that it necessitates writing some custom scripts to transform that data. At least it did for me. Maybe you're smarter than me and you figured a way out to do it, right? And so I dealt with all of that last fall and had all that lying around. And so I thought, oh, this is going to be easy peasy. I'll just run this through. And, well, long story short, it was not proving to be easy peasy quite yet.
But easier, just not easier.
Yeah. And I've gotten one-off smart, but I context switch so much that it's to the point now I can't remember anything. So I have to take notes. And I know if I don't take notes, I won't remember. So luckily, I had taken notes about my process last year. And luckily, I also have the self-discipline to do certain things when I code. So I always use source control, even if it's just like a small little one-off project. Yeah. And I always leave a README behind too. And so those two things really helped, kind of boot up.
Is that primarily where you're taking notes, or do you use something else that you then transfer notes over to? Or everyone has an opinion on taking apps and stuff like that, but like you primarily using the README and the repo.
I'm my own worst enemy when it comes to notes. My issue with notes is every week I think of a different place to take them.
Yes.
It's like, I'll try Google Doc this week. That's got to be better than what I was doing last week. No, Google Docs are dumb. I'm going to do Apple Notes because it syncs across them. No, Apple Notes. Anyway, so what I do is the README I try to make about how to use the software I've written.
Sure.
It's like, how to invoke it, what I'm doing, how to use it. Like if there's like a step, because there's several steps in the process, like just outlining those. But the notes I use are my working notes. Like, here's what I'm trying today. This didn't work. Okay, here's what I'm going to try tomorrow, or here's what I ended up doing. So the combination of those two things kind of helps sort of rehydrate that mental context that I was in when I worked on it the first time.
Nice.
How about you?
So I try to do my best to take notes in that fashion. A lot of times, what I've done, at least if it's project specific, like a custom theme that I'm working on, for instance, like there's OnePlus Shop that I work with. They had their theme built by a Plus agency that's got just tons of stuff everywhere. So I take notes in Basecamp is my project management software. So I'll take notes there. In addition to code, notes within code or whatever that you can call out specifically or what have you. But it's often easiest for me to just, while I already have that up for project deliverables, just to have something set up where I can take notes quickly from there. But I've been experimenting a bit with Apple Notes. I kind of like how they work. It's pretty simple. That's nice. So it only works if you've got a lot of Apple products, though, which I've only just moved to iPhone just this last year.
I've been using Apple Notes too. My big beef there, and this is why I keep switching to and from them, is I like to put code snippets in my notes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I haven't found a way to do it that don't look like garbage. And I remember searching for this, and there wasn't a way around it at the time.
Yeah, Basecamp has got a good solution for that, because if it is code, I usually prefer to do it in Basecamp or GitHub, drop it into a gist and then just link to the gist or something like that. But again, there's always extra steps versus it would just be nice to just bam, 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 bam. Another one that I've liked a lot is an app called Simple Note, but it's just super simple Markdown editor. Yeah, it's in the name. Markdown, so it supports code and all that fun stuff or whatever. Searchable tags, real simple. I like it. That's my other go-to and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I've got another one I'm trying right now. I've got a subscription to Set App, which is collection of apps you can get access to for anyway. It's called Note Plans. I'm messing with that one too. Hence the I don't know where my notes are because I've got 6 different note systems.
They're everywhere. But anyways, back to your so you create your own notes for when you're writing software. You primarily do the README, but you're writing this and kind of comparing your notes from the last time, and that helps expedite things quite a bit.
Thank you for summary. You're like ChatGPT. You just summarize the whole thing. Thanks, Taylor. But you use way less power. And fellow listener, thank you for bearing with us. It's one of those days. Yeah, okay. So I got my notes, got everything set up. First thing I realized was that in BigCommerce, I just assumed certain things were standard. And so you can set up export templates, which I knew in BigCommerce. And when you go to export orders, you can choose what template you want to use. And then those templates, that lets you go through the different sort of big categories: orders, customers, products, things like that. So I always make one just for orders. And then you can actually customize the field names. And so I thought that there was a sane default there, and I was just going to use that. But it turns out the way I wrote my script the first time was against an export template that had some not sane defaults. So the first thing I realized was that, these fields aren't actually lining up anymore, and it's not a big problem. I just need to edit this template. But it's good to realize that before you export 11 years worth of order data for BigCommerce, which I did, thankfully. But something you want to think about.
That's because you run in a smaller...
Yes.
You usually run a smaller data set first, right? And then... I remember this from last time. I remember from our convo.
Oh, wow. So
That's helped me on ones. Yeah.
And it's in the outline. So you probably just read it.
It's in one of my 7 places I take notes. So
that's right.
Yeah, it's in the outline.
No, I was just going to say, like, my key takeaway, again, trying to be as Shopify specific as possible here, but it's this sort of general thing, is whenever I approach an export job, I always try to do a small batch of data for 2 reasons. One is to make sure my tooling works. 2, you want as quick of a feedback cycle as you can get, right? Rapid development, rapid iteration, and there's just a lot of slowness around export, import. Yeah, I said that right. And so if you can keep that to enough data that will reveal, the 90% of what you're going to run into, but small enough that you can easily dump it out of Shopify and then re-export out of BigCommerce, so you can constantly make those tweaks, because there's no easy way to simulate it other than just doing it. But keeping it sensible helps. But then with that, what I have found too is it's really important to get your client on board with what you're producing. And so how I approach this is, I make sure it looks good to me, right? And there's lots of nuance there in terms of looking over the documentation, figuring out the fields Matrixify expects, making sure it ends up in Shopify the way you would expect it to look, and doing some of that manual just verification. But then at some point, getting the customer on board and saying, hey, I have imported a week's worth of your orders. Please take a look at them. How they look, because what you don't know is what they actually are going to do with that data. Because it's more than just looking at it in Shopify. Often they're running reports, or they're exporting it out of Shopify for some other tool, and there's a lot of variation sometimes. So that's kind of where I'm at right now in the process.
Yeah, so that's important with everything, right? Like building some sort of an MVP of sorts. I do this all the time from a theme dev perspective too, where someone says, this is what we want. Here's a site that has this. It's like, okay, great. But then you do it, consistent with their own branding and within their own theme or whatever content, and they see it in action. They're like, I don't like this, or whatever. Yeah. Like it's totally different when all of a sudden it's in a different context. And so, I always ask for, like some kind of version or mock-up or whatever, so that way you can make sure you're on the same page and try to build that out as small as possible, without investing too much time in it, just because, I want to make sure I'm doing a good job. And you want to make sure you're doing a job with the client of like, hey, like, this looks good to me. I've checked off all the boxes of like, you said you wanted the order history. Here's the order history, and waiting for them to say, well, like, we need this specific thing. It's way better than when you're at the end of the project and you're like, this is done. And they're like, this is nowhere near done.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always good to get that feedback, because not only can you make the changes more easily at the front end, obviously, before you get too far into it, but then it also is, consultants or however you're working with that client, it establishes a little bit of CYA for you in terms of if you get further along in the project and they have a problem with it, like, well, actually you signed off on the way it looked.
Right.
I've got this email chain where you were pretty happy with it 6 months ago, so I don't know what your problem is.
This is new information.
That's right.
So,
because that will help you. If nothing else, just shows that you did your due diligence. Even if that ends up you do need to make some tweaks, at least you can show that it wasn't just guesswork.
Yeah. Well, I've even had to do that with a job that I'm doing. I'm still working on this meta objects, like heavy redesign for a 2.0 upgrade. Like, so a vintage theme that's like the 2.0, again, like some agency, like way back when, built this theme, and now we're updating to a 2.0 theme, all this other stuff or what have you. But even going over stuff like, we're building out the meta objects, which is nice. You can kind of shape the data how you want to like surface throughout the theme. But like as like we're doing check-ins, it's like, okay, well we also want this. It's like, okay, well I essentially have to add this to the data model then, because like that's not something we've ever talked about before. So it's good and bad to do the checks. I mean, I say good and bad. It feels like it's more work as you're doing it, because they keep piling stuff on top of it or whatever.
Yeah.
But it is still way better than getting to the end of it and being like, oh no, they're like, this isn't what we want at all.
There is an art to doing this in a way that does not invite additional scope, because customers typically don't work with software developers on a regular basis, and so they're not gifted in this area. But like you start showing them things, and of course their natural reaction is to start wanting more, right?
Yes.
And so you have to do it in a way that like helps like verify that this is what you want, but doesn't open the conversation to like, and here's all the possibilities of what we could do for you, right? Like,
yes. And
don't go there.
I'm bad at that. Like this is like, I'm like, oh, we could also do, I'm really bad at that. So that is an area that I need to grow in for sure, because I get myself in trouble. And then I get frustrated because like we're adding to the scope, but like it was also my fault. Like beforehand, they were happy with the product until I told them we could also do this now.
It's hard not to, because, that's kind of, I think the personality type that gets into this field a lot is people that like to solve problems, like to come up with really cool solutions. And so you naturally kind of want to go there with your clients, but you get down the road long enough and like you just get tired. Like, no.
Well,
I can't do this anymore.
I was having this conversation with someone the other day about, it's one of those things where, we like to think about like, especially, devs, like you want to think about like what's best. Like, should we do this as a custom template or a meta field or a meta object? Like, where does this data live or get stored for something or whatever kind of type thing? And, I was like, well, I don't know. Like, best is hard because, like, it's going to depend on the client. It's going to depend on their timeline, their budget, their own technical abilities at handoff as well for them to understand, like, certain things. And so, like, sometimes best it's not simple. Like, it's a judgment call in a lot of instances. And so, I think that's where it's hard of, like, you try to present the options without being overwhelming or potentially leading them down into like a totally different pathway or whatever. It's definitely it's a balance, right?
Yep. The other thing I would say along that is we tend to think on a very implementation detailed level. It always helps to zoom out to the strategic level and always ask your customer, okay, like this field isn't maybe coming through exactly the way you want it. For an example, in this particular case, when you export from Shopify, the subtotal amount that comes out, not using Matrixify, using Shopify, is inclusive of any coupon discounts. And they wanted a subtotal that didn't have that because they do reporting. They want to show sales comparisons. They don't want to have the coupons mess with that data because they want to do an apples to apples sort of like how are our actual sales comparing, regardless of any discounts that were applied. And sense. So on one hand, they're very frustrated because like, well, how can we get this to work? And on my side, I'm like, well, I don't know. But then when we zoom down, like, well, what are you trying to do? Oh, it's this report. Oh, okay. Well, there's a lot of ways we can run this report or get the data you need for that report, right? That makes sense. Let's not get caught up on that. So it always helps to just take a step back and understand, okay, what are your customers' needs? What are they trying to do with the data? Besides just have it look a certain way, like what are they actually going to accomplish with it? Because there's many opportunities maybe to address that in different ways.
Yeah, there's asking, not necessarily trusting the client, I think, to understand the problem more so than the implementation. Like, I think that's always the tough ask of, like, you sometimes have, like, really well-informed, very intelligent merchants in those specific areas who are like, I know this is what we're supposed to do, like, right, or whatever. And, like, that's usually a good field. Like, okay, like, let's do that. But, yeah, a lot of times when you run into a brick wall, it's good to ask, like, well, like, what's the actual problem we're trying to solve here? I had that with another one, same thing where a shop is trying to get rid of a Metafields app that they're using because they want to use just the native Metafields editors. Like, yeah, that's fine to do or whatever. That information lives on your shop. Like, you don't need the app for that. It's just an interface, right? However, like, if you want to interact with the shop object specifically for meta fields, you can't do that in native Shopify or whatever. You have to have an app in order to interact with the shop, like add meta fields to the shop directly.
Right.
And so a way around that, or a hacky way around that, obviously, like meta objects, easy answer, right? Because like those are globally accessible, right? But anyways, so they were like, well, we have, and I was looking through their theme, like you basically have these two that you have from the previous dev that worked in this, and what have you, and like you've got a couple different versions of this that's in the theme. How are you using these? And they're like, well, we want this one for pre-orders or something. And I was like, well, why would you have like pre-orders products on the shop object anyways? Like this doesn't make a ton of sense. Right. I was like, but I had to ask about like how they were implementing it. They were like, well, we can't get rid of this because like we're going to use this for pre-orders. So it's like, okay, well, how are you wanting to use this for pre-orders? And then when you talk to them about it, you're like, okay, well, like this isn't what you want anyways. Like you don't need this. Right. Like this is what you should be using instead. So asking the tough questions, of like, what's the actual ask here? What's the problem you're actually trying to solve? And then, hopefully you have a good enough relationship with the merchant that they trust you with the implementation, even if it takes a little bit of explaining on your part.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. And sometimes, too, you have to wonder about the relationships you're working with. So it's not uncommon that you're in an email chain with, say, 3 or 4 people that represent the client or the customer, right? And the primary person you're interfacing with may not have the full picture in terms of what needs to be done. So they're asking for something because that's what they've been directed to ask. It's like the question and requirements thing that, if you're a SpaceX engineering guy, right? Like that's one of their big mantras. Like, where did this requirement come from? Was it some intern from 3 years ago that came up with this and is no longer even with the company, but we're just blindly following it? Long story. Anyway, so it's good to be able to like figure out, okay, who actually is the stakeholder of this requirement? Is it the person I'm communicating with? Is it someone else in the company I need to get clarity with? Because it might not be a big deal, or there might be a way around it. So that's something always to keep in mind too. The final thing I just want to throw about the import project too is level set expectations about timelines. For example, they originally wanted all this done by the end of June. And when we clarified what they wanted all of their data. And when I looked at BigCommerce to see how far back the data went, it goes back 13 years. I was like, jeez. I very quickly came back and said, look, like, there's no way I'm going to get all 13 years of your data imported this month based on what I know, how long this is going to take me, how much time I have available, how much it's going to take to work, because you always get failures that you have to manually kind of work through. But what do you need right now? Because I'm guessing what you need right now is maybe this year's worth of data. Right? And then it would be okay over the following weeks to add in the other 13 years that I'm sure you're never going to look at, but one in there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, what do you really need data from 10 years ago for? Like, like...
Which I get. I would want it too, just to have it in one place. But
sure. Yeah.
But being able to find those ways of working together, because it makes your life so much nicer, and they just don't know what they need sometimes. So
yeah. Is it common, like, when I've done WooCommerce, like WordPress migrations, like it's not uncommon for us to like go ahead and do the migration, and usually my recommendation to them is like just go ahead and like keep this all active. We'll put it on a subdomain or something like that, or whatever kind of type thing. But we'll keep this active like for an extended period of time to like make this accessible to you still. Just like from a historical standpoint, that way if you're like going through stuff down the road like 3-4 months from now, you're like, hey, like we need this or whatever, and I know it lives over here, then like we can like revisit if we need to like go back and do something or whatever kind of type thing. So is it common too for like BigCommerce to like do something along those lines? I'm not familiar at all with BigCommerce and how it works, because I've never done a migration from BigCommerce or had to work with BigCommerce really before. Curious about what are you typically recommending in their scenarios? Or are you just along for the import export, or just you get literally everything out and then the data lives somewhere else for you just to hang on to if you need to like get to it later kind of type thing?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think it depends on their needs, but it definitely makes a lot of sense, in my opinion, if you're ever doing a project like this, to keep the original system online in a way that's accessible, even when you're no longer processing orders through it. I don't think it needs to be there for forever, but if it always gives confidence, right? And then if worst case scenario comes and you realize that there was some fundamental flaw in how you brought stuff over, and they recognize it 3 months down the road, then you at least have an opportunity to actually go back and fix it. Especially some situations I saw recently, someone did this similar thing, but they forgot to put the old site on a subdomain, so it became no longer accessible once they migrated the shop name over to Shopify. Obviously, there's ways to get in it, but it just made it a lot harder. So it's good to think ahead like you're doing. So yes, I definitely encourage that.
Yeah, I just was curious what the strategy looks like there as far as like making it simple. And yeah, I don't think it's like one of those, like 6 months to a year. Like if you haven't accessed that, if you haven't found a reason to keep that stuff around like within that time frame, then like, you know, it's safe to kill off or whatever. So usually the cost for that's pretty negligible, you know, just to maintain in that regard.
Yeah. So I'm still in the thick of it. We'll see how it goes, but I'm optimistic. Made a few changes. I would say the two things that stuck out to me today that I want to pass along as developers are, dates and times. Those are fun. So pay attention to those.
Those are fun.
Especially BigCommerce doesn't send out any time zone information in their dates or times. And so you have to figure out, okay, what time zone is the store set for? And then in your script, you have to modify the date time value to add in the offset for the time zone so that Shopify picks it up correctly. Because Shopify will presume it's UTC if it doesn't know anything else. And that could be a problem if that's important to your customer.
Sure.
And then when you import customers, Shopify tries really hard to match. And what I have found can be tricky, especially when you have a large historic data set like this, is the customer often will switch email addresses at some point along the road. And then it gets into a problem because it starts creating like multiple customers that are the same person. And then it does match at some point, but then it complains that phone number is already in use or something like that because you basically have ended up with multiple customers now. So those are tricky too.
Is there not a way to like merge from the API, like specific customers or something like that?
Yeah, not with this import workflow that I have. But what you can do is I think it's essentially removing listener, again, if I misspeak, I apologize. But I think it's the phone number that trips it up the most.
Yeah,
like
the
if
phone
it
number
has a different
ProMac, right?
Yeah, if there's a different email address from what's already been recorded for a customer, but the same phone number. And so Shopify is in that particular line of importation. It's trying to create a new customer because it couldn't match the email, but it sees the phone numbers in there already. And so it says you can't actually do this because this phone number is already in use. It will actually refuse to import that row. And so when that happens, what I do is I just strip out the phone numbers and then it will import it just fine, potentially create a new customer. But then you can always merge them in manually in Shopify if that's important to you.
Yeah, well, I was trying to figure out, I was like, because I know you can merge customers in the admin or whatever. I've never tried to do that programmatically or anything, obviously, but curious.
And Matrixify is interesting. If you get an error, and you will in Matrixify, like the result, it gives you back a result spreadsheet, and it'll say which ones failed, and we'll say why it failed. Those error messages aren't typically like custom Matrixify error messages. They're typically just passing back what came from the Shopify API. So if you're mystified, like what does this mean? A great way to either check or just compare it would be to spin up the Shopify API, which I've done before using a Ruby console and using some of the gems that let you interact with Shopify's API, and then trying the data myself to see like, okay, what part of that data I'm sending over is triggering this error message, and you can get a much better and clearer understanding of what's going on. So
nice.
And with that, I think I'm done talking about import and export, unless you have anything else you want to.
No, I think it's really interesting just because like that is, I don't know, I've talked to a handful of devs, and you know, anytime people talk about like a migration, you know, job or something like that or whatever, they're like, oh yeah, like that's going to be really simple. It's like, you haven't done very many migrations if you think it's going to be simple, you know?
Right.
Like, or like, I mean, it's great if by migration you mean like, you know, we get to start from scratch on a new like evergreen Shopify site, and like we're just moving the domain over. Like, sure, that's simple or whatever, but you know, migration is by no means ever simple. I've not got a simple migration like that before. That'd be great.
Yeah. Cool.
But yeah, let's next segment here. Let's do it.
Sure. So Taylor, it's as we're recording this, it's early June 2024. As you're listening to this, it's probably later. But we've been doing this for 10 months? 9 months?
Yeah.
This podcast?
24 episodes.
24 episodes, I guess it is. Yeah, 2 a month. A little more than that. So it's been a while. And
2 months.
As we approach the spring, and you and I were both talking about how, well, I think I brought it up primarily because I was feeling it. But I was like, you know, it'd be nice just to have some time off and try to take the summer slower and to enjoy life and family in the few scant, hospitable, habitable months of weather here in Ohio. And so we thought, it makes sense to kind of wrap up and have a season of the Liquid Weekly podcast, take a little breather, and then come back at it in the fall. And so this seemed like a natural time for us to kind of reflect over, how did we get here? What are we doing?
What are we doing?
And so
I think it's good. I think it's good to do the recap, do the look back.
Let's take a moment in retrospect. So I started the newsletter Liquid Weekly 3 years ago this August, I think.
That's awesome.
I think it was 3 years, 2 or 3 years. And for me, when I started it, it was because I wanted the very same thing for myself, because I needed a way to keep up to date with what was going on. And I thought other people might want that too. And I'm always looking for little side experiments to try. I'd never done an email list. I thought, well, do you think anyone would ever subscribe to an email list that I put out there? You hear about people with like these 50,000 people lists. I don't know. Let's find out. So, of course, I had a couple friends that signed up at first, and it kept growing. And it's not a absolutely huge list, but it's a significant list, and I feel like it's been successful. And then a year or two into that, I thought, what makes sense? I've done the newsletter thing. Let's do a podcast. And luckily, serendipitously, you and I met through the newsletter. Right? And I kind of had a connection. I thought, there's no way I could do a podcast well by myself, because my vision of the podcast was always not only to be about Shopify, but to have it be fun and have someone to talk to and share funny anecdotes with. And I know people probably hate listening to us do these things, but it's part of what I enjoy, and no one's paying me to do this, so I'm going to do what I enjoy. So it just made sense when you were open to the idea and interested as well, right? Because you were kind of also thinking of something similar.
Yeah. I've wanted to do a podcast for a long time. And same, like I did not, I was not wanting to try to do that by myself as far as, what that looked like. I didn't know what that would look like. I think a lot of the successful podcasts I liked, they were usually like co-hosts, right? And they're either presenting information or doing like interviews and stuff like that, or what have you, just listening to one person, or whatever. Especially me, like I don't need more opportunities to drone on, right? I need some back and forth, or whatever. So yeah, I was really excited when you reached out about the idea of doing a podcast with Liquid Weekly, because I love the mission behind Liquid Weekly too. It's something I can definitely get behind.
Yeah, and I have to say, we'll have more to talk about here in a second, but having you work on this with me, I feel like was the key ingredient, because I have seen over this winter your level of involvement in the Twitter space and your ability to sort of engage with other developers has been a huge win for us and for all the guests we've had, right? Because that was never our vision necessarily, to have guests on as often as we did.
No.
But you just have a way of connecting with folks, and people seemed to not know enough to say no to us at the time.
I know. That's what I keep telling people, is like, I can't believe people kept saying yes. Like, I just would talk to someone about something and be like, you want to come on the podcast, talk about this sometime? Like, yeah. Like, oh, awesome. Okay, great.
Yeah.
It just kept happening.
So that was huge. Obviously, and tons of other stuff you brought to the table too, in terms of help editing and all this other stuff. So I'm really glad it worked out and that you've done this with me too. But I got to get ahead of myself. Anyway, so when we started this in the fall, if anyone else is thinking about doing this, you try to think, like, what's the best way to go about this? And it's easy to think, like, you got to go super complex, right? Like, what's the best studio setup? Or is my microphone good enough? Like, how are we going to sell ads? Whatever it might be, right? It's like, no. Like, I got some AirPods, and I found an affordable piece of software, Riverside.fm, that seems to do everything we need it to do. And you just start talking, because the only way to get better at it is to do it. And so even if you have to throw out the first couple episodes because you're so terrible, you got to do it to get there. So that's kind of how I approached it. How about you? What was your thinking?
Yeah, well, I didn't do anything, extra. I don't think, other than what we were already doing. I had already invested a little bit, probably more than the average Joe, because I was doing a couple of YouTube videos at the time, and so had a mic and a camera set up, because I do a lot of, anyways, recording videos for clients and stuff, and so obviously that's, you want those to look polished or whatever. But yeah, I don't think there was too much. I thought there would be maybe more prep work. There's not as much prep work as I thought, because we ended up doing like a lot of guest episodes. There's definitely a lot more like after the fact, like admin, like around podcasts. than I anticipated. That workload was actually the one that ended up being a whole deal outside of, like I said, it's not like we do a ton of prepping for episodes ahead of time outside of what we're already working in.
Right.
Like there's a lot of resources we're already stumbling across all the time. And so this is usually just a good opportunity to like try to consolidate them and share them in one way.
Yeah, for sure. And you do a lot of work. Like those of you that don't know or don't see and hear me make fun of Taylor in Basecamp, like he's got a whole thing set up where scheduling guests and like when the things are going out, and I never know what's going on, but I know if I looked it would be in there, so appreciate that.
Yes, for sure. Project management software is definitely the way to go there as far as because otherwise I wouldn't be able to keep track of it either. Just gotta go somewhere, right? Otherwise it's one of the 7 note-taking apps somewhere, like, and you gotta figure out which one it is for which episode.
So as we look back over the past year of doing this, what are some things that come to mind for you? Like about what do you think went well? What do you think didn't go as well maybe as it could have? What would you like to change? Just that kind of stuff. I think popped to mind for you.
Yeah, I mean, what went well...
Better co-host?
I'll probably circle around... No, there could not find a better co-host, Carl. But as far as what went well, I think what went well was the guest episodes. People seem to really resonate with those and really enjoy those, too. Historically, like, I wouldn't say that... I think that was the plan to, like, be primarily us interviewing people, necessarily. But I am really glad. I think, like I said, that people just kept saying yes. I think that's been really cool, just to like learn so much from so many other people who just have a lot of like deep knowledge in areas that I don't really get to touch a whole lot within Shopify. Because I'm already like pretty niche, right, as a developer, right? Like real heavy into Shopify. That's all I do, and those sorts of things. But even then, there's stuff that I'm just learning from people all the time, and that blows me away. Challenging or poorly, or maybe things to do differently. So because we got into such a good groove with people, like we ended up scheduling like so far out, right? And that got kind of hard because we had a couple of people that I really wanted to come on the podcast, but we were like, we're scheduling like 3 months out because you and I can only record every other week with our schedules and stuff, and so that made it hard to get people in. Where it's just like, oh man, not that like I would want to replace any of the people we had. I would love if we had more time to invest in the calls, but it's hard. It's already hard to like find the time to record and then everything surrounding that. So, but yeah. So like as far as like challenging or poorly challenging, I would say getting good constructive feedback from listeners and other devs. I'm really grateful that people are like, hey, like we love the podcast. It's great. It's like awesome. How can it be better? And most people are like, yeah, it's great. I don't know. It's great.
Is it better?
And so I think people are just trying to be like really nice, and I really appreciate that. That's obviously super kind, but I'm a huge fan of constructive criticism. I never think anything's perfect or done, and so I would love to get more. Maybe I'm opening up a can of worms here. People are going to listen to this and be like, "Oh man, like they're submitting all this stuff or whatever." And I'm going to cry for a week or whatever. But I would love more constructive criticism, feedback, and maybe that just has to deal with maybe us setting up better ways to garner that feedback. Maybe it's too personal if I'm like asking people directly, like, "Well, what do you think?" And people are like, I really don't want to hurt your feelings, So, but yeah, so like overall. That all's been great. Guests, getting to hang out with you every couple of weeks. That's really awesome too. So obviously didn't want to forget you, but those are my highlights. I'm sure there's other things that if we wanted to like really drill down, get into the nitty gritty and stuff like that, I could probably think of some more. The recording software, that would be another thing I think that went well. Like Riverside's pretty good. We only had a couple of hiccups with like dropping stuff or disconnections, and that might just be people's connections or something like that. But what about you?
I will start with things that I think could have done better. So I think I've dropped the ball a little bit where I really wanted to bring the newsletter and the podcast into greater alignment, and for we've got the liquidweekly.com homepage. I really wanted that to serve sort of as a portal into all kinds of information that would serve the Shopify developer community. We've got this big, long list of curated articles and content from the last 3 years. Obviously, some of it's probably out of date now, but a lot of it's still relevant. It's all on there. You just have to search by issue. I'd like to make it easier to find, right? group it by keyword or topic of interest, something, which I need to get around to doing that. I wish I would have done a better job on social media in terms of promoting both the newsletter but also the podcast. Like, you've done a great job doing that, and I'm just not on there that often for various reasons. But I think that's probably where most of our interactions have happened. It's been in the Twitter space. I'm guessing maybe some LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, a little LinkedIn, mostly Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I would have done a better job. Yeah, just, I guess, promotion in general. I think the quality is something I think real hard about too, in terms of the audios, the visuals, the editing. Not that you're not doing a good job. I think you're doing a great job with all those things. But is there things we can do to take it to the next level? And then especially the format. Yeah. To your point, like, we don't get a lot of critical feedback right now. It's like, do people like hearing us talk about our personal lives? Like, is that helpful to have a human connection at the beginning of the episode? Just kind of what the hypothesis there was. Or is it just wasted time people skip through, or makes it hard to get to the end of the interview? That kind of stuff. So trying to better assess all that for the next time, because as far as I can tell, like, there will be a next time, right? So we're going to keep doing this in the fall and do it better and have more fun. From the win side, I think, you and I aren't getting paid to do this. We're just doing it for fun. We don't make any revenue, but I think we've definitely become richer in our relationships with other developers.
Yeah.
I feel like that's been something that caught me by surprise, because, again, we weren't necessarily planning on doing such a guest-centric podcast.
Right.
But I've met so many wonderful people through this platform, thanks, to you finding them and them coming on. I feel like, man, you couldn't ask for, a compensation that would be better than that, I think, in terms of professional network and having access to these really smart people now, and helping even get their names out so other people can benefit from knowing them and realizing they're out there. So.
Yeah, and I like, again, I love that really aligns well with Liquid Weekly.
Right.
When you had started, just like kind of the one-stop shop place for, elevate other developers who are creating helpful content, providing good information in the space, and so not everybody is going to, have the time or the capability necessarily to sit down and write a blog post or something like that. And so being able to come on here and with people that we've seen in the community that are just like super helpful and uplifting and bring them on here has been a great way to extend that format, I think, as far as that part goes. So
sure.
I agree with like the editing and the format and stuff like that. I think there's definitely things we could tighten up there, and some of that might just be somebody who actually knows what they're doing, kind of doing some of that stuff to some degree as well. But I would also agree, you can't really put a price on like establishing relationships with really cool people in the system and stuff like that. So I'm pretty excited about that aspect of things for sure. Just being able to put not just faces to the name because you see people on social media, right? But like actually getting to talk to them, have a conversation with them. That's been really cool.
Yeah, and let me just be clear about the editing piece. I wasn't throwing you under the bus at all. Like,
He was throwing me under the bus, people.
No. I'm thinking things like, I want better sound effects and like
where's your soundboard? You had it really early on, and it went away. I have a soundboard somewhere in here, and now I don't even know where it is. I was going to hook it up one week and surprise you, and I just haven't done it.
Oh,
I don't
man,
even know where it is now.
Cat's out of the bag now. Back to the people aspect, I think it's easy to not appreciate how unique this Shopify niche is, because I've been on the interwebs long enough to realize, like, not every community is nice. A lot of communities are pretty toxic, just to be honest, especially in the developer world, right? You've got ones where people just aren't nice, and it's not a great place to be. I feel like the Shopify developer community, for the most part, has always been a really pleasant, supportive, uplifting place, even though in some sense we're all competing on some level. Like, app developers are all wanting to get their app out, and consultants all want those clients, right? So we're all in the same market, but we're doing it in a way that's professional and friendly for the most part. And the other piece of that sort of triad is Shopify itself. Like, I remember what it was like for people that were Microsoft developer platform people, right, back in the day. And Microsoft's not a great company to hitch your wagon to necessarily, right? But I feel like Shopify has done a really good job of supporting the developer community. And they're a for-profit corporation, and so they're always going to make decisions that align best with their interests. But for the most part, I feel like they've done a great job of trying to find that middle road that also is very supportive of what we do is third-party developers and supporting the community and giving great tools along the way as well. Not perfect tools, but great tools for the most part, I think, right? So,
well, yeah,
being very open too.
Yeah, progress, right? Everything's about progress. So,
and it's so easy
to be
to
very open to what? Like, I interrupted you there.
Oh, I can't remember what I said, but very open-handed. Oh, open in terms of like, we get access to people at Shopify. They're willing to come on and talk to us. They have the Slack. They tweet. It's not completely opaque what's going on inside of Shopify. It is to some degree, but there's still a fair bit of transparency there, which I appreciate.
Yeah, that just even that we've had, people, Liam Griffin's a great example, just supporting the podcast, in social media circles, having Michael come on, Kimberly and stuff to talk about, the updates, and those sorts of things like that. That's been huge just to have that level of support, from those folks, or just, like you said, Shopify staff just being willing to like answer questions on Slack or on Twitter or whatever kind of type thing. That part's really cool to see. And I think that kind of reflects to a little bit of maybe the challenging or like the signals that we're looking at for like how the newsletter, how the podcast is growing and those sorts of things or not growing. Some of it reflects just like how small our community really is. Like, it's hard not to compare because Shopify is like this big, like globally known company now, right? But a lot of the dev community, like we're pretty small compared to like if you want to compare to like WordPress community or all these other like different like really large like platforms where developers hang out. We're still pretty niche, And so it's nice that we have to where we can kind of still talk with a lot of those people. They're not completely inaccessible in the upper, in their ivory tower of of whatever,
And so that, I think kind of brings us to a place of like, what's next for us? I know we plan on pulling back a little bit this summer just to be able to take advantage of time with our families and enjoy the nice weather and stuff. But then in the fall, I think we plan on being back in the saddle for season 2, so to speak, of Liquid Weekly. I think, for both of us, well, I'm not going to speak for you, but our heart is still the same. Like, man, we're really excited to disseminate, amazing technical knowledge about Shopify and also to connect with Shopify developers and try to elevate the community and help everyone be more successful just by working together and getting access to all the cool things that people are doing. That's what keeps me excited about going into the next season. How about you?
Yeah, I think more of the same. I think there's some things that we can do as far as like we talked about like tightening up to like make it better in the next season. And so I think historically, I'll be honest, I haven't like enjoyed. I've like been kind of disappointed when I've like found a podcast and I'm like, we're taking a break, and I'm like, no, like what? Like you're part of my routine. Like what's happening here? But I think for us, especially right now at this time, like I think it's good to pause a little bit, to do like a little bit of a longer period of reflection. Maybe we can do a little more prep, a little more make things a little bit more polished, or just like come into it more intentionally. That's been a big goal of mine personally for this year too, is just to be more thoughtful in general. And I think taking time over the summer, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but you always have this idea going into summer that's just like, all right, like we're gonna like be a little chill, like scale back a little bit or whatever kind of thing, and it always ends up being super busy. Like this month, like I did my triathlon. My wife's gonna do a duathlon next week. We've got additions here in just a couple of weeks. At the time of this recording, at least, probably by the time this comes out, additions will have already happened, and Karl will have been totally out of the loop. But that. So it's like it's this super busy month. Next month will be easier, but yeah, there's this idea of, if you don't give yourself breathing room, time to relax, time to reflect, and those sorts of things, I think it's really easy to just get used to just charging forward. And so, yeah, definitely taking time, stop, take stock. I think it's going to like really rejuvenate and get us excited too for the next season. See who else we can convince to come on here and chat with us, and then also the things that we get to talk about. Hopefully we start to become a little bit more of that go-to resource for people where they're going to like just get caught up. I think that's awesome. That's cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it, Taylor. I've enjoyed everything so far, and I can't wait to even get better. And maybe during our little downtime this summer, we can actually connect in person again. Maybe we do need to hang out. That needs to happen. So I know we're trying to make it happen today. So you could run, bike, and swim down here to Columbus. So for for those of you that are listening, I live about an hour and a half north of Karl in Ohio, and so I am not riding that far on a bicycle. I will be riding my motorcycle down, even if that makes Karl nervous or whatever.
I'm trying to see if there's a river that goes up there that you could just swim down, but no, there's not. The Scioto goes the other way. Sorry.
Most run east-west up this way. But we've talked about, like, if you want to come up sometime, I know you don't camp, but like you could always come check out Mohican up here. That's really close to me as well, and so there's that. But we go down to Columbus to hang out. There's a couple of nice places down there, and so we hit you up for lunch some point or something. So
a little celebratory end of season 1 lunch. I think that's in order.
It is in order.
If you're listening and you live in Ohio, and well, it's probably after we've already met for lunch. But if you want to join us, let us know. We'll catch up sometime. It'll be fun.
Yeah, we need to do some meetups, man. Like we need to figure that out. We talked about that briefly. We need to get it figured out.
Well, shall we transition to the changelog? Or do you have anything else?
You ready for the changelog? Yeah.
I mean,
we can.
Can anyone ever be ready for it? I don't know.
That's one of those things where I'm looking at the things we're going to improve on. I think we've talked about the changelog. It's a part of the segment. I think it's good to have, but by the time we release, it's not super helpful because most people, it's already been out for a week or two. And I would imagine, like, if you're running an app, like, are you watching the changelog or checking it daily, regularly, religiously, like, or are you waiting for something like this or for something to break? I don't know. I'm not an app dev, so I like to check this personally. But easiest way that I have it is a RSS feed set up in our Slack. The partner Slack has it set up as a channel, changelog, FYI. In addition to visiting, so you can see the schedule, but also for the Slack that I'm running with David, Shop Dev Alliance too. Like, we have that set up too because I think it's so handy. I just like seeing it as it comes in. But,
yeah, actually, real quick, before you do the changelog, plug it real quick. Shop Dev Alliance. Give you your 1 minute plug for folks listening.
So Shop Dev Alliance is just we're calling it like a freelance, paid freelance Slack community for Shopify developers. Now, I say freelance because I think that's where, like, our content and everything has, like, really catered and geared towards, but we've got a lot of, like, solo app operators and stuff like that in there now too, as well. So the idea is more so, we're trying or aiming for the benefit of the Shopify partner Slack, which is amazing, but a often featured caveat to that is that they're spamming it just like any other free open channel, and it's really hard for Shopify. We can't really expect them to moderate that. There's like 40,000 people in the partner Slack or something like that. It's an insane number, and so this is more of this is a moderated Slack just for experienced developers. So it's not really for like beginner questions for stuff like that or whatever. There's like plenty of other good groups for that out there, and those sorts of things. This is more for like people that they're running businesses on Shopify, providing services to support Shopify merchants, and they're doing that in the dev space. So themes, apps, whatever, and those sorts of things is where that's at. So probably a lot longer than a minute, but that's what it is.
No, if that sounds like it appeals to you and you want to support Taylor and what he's doing, like, definitely check it out. It's worth it. I'm going to be jumping in there here shortly. Just gotta sign up, and we'll see. We'll hang out together. It'd be great.
Do it. Yep, you got to apply, and then we'll let you in. So Karl did apply. So I told David I didn't know. I was like, I don't know when I saw that application come through. So, but he was cool with it. He signed off on it, so that's all right.
Okay.
So developer changelog, we'll shift to that. So if you are a developer, if you are in the Shop Dev Alliance Slack, you'll notice that there is or the partner Slack, there is a channel just for the changelog. I highly recommend paying attention to that. Just so that way you can pay attention to it. I have Slack up all the time, so it might be easier than checking the site. But changelog, one of the things that's not in the scheduled tab that's current, it was effective as of May 23rd, that I thought was just like nice to bring up, was even more personalized guidance during app submission. So I'm not sure if you saw this, but basically you can kind of pre-select apps capabilities early on in the submission process so they get a personalized list of requirements. So it's really helpful, basically, depending on the kind of problems you're trying to solve with your app, whether you're doing something like fulfillment or you're doing upsells and things like this or what have you, it'll give you more of an opportunity basically to get some specific about your app when you're going through that submission process. So Shopify is doing a lot to kind of tighten all that up. Both the process before and after. They're cleaning up the app listings and stuff like that. So a lot of good stuff going on in that space. So just like a nice little FYI, if it's been a minute since you've done that and you're not looking forward to submitting your next app, they have actually kind of cleaned that up a little bit.
Nice.
Yeah. So some other things that are going on there, I just wanted to probably highlight a couple of these or just reference. One of them was like a new update for the location object. If your app is using the location object in the admin API, it's now going to be required that you have the read location scope. So you will need to make sure to update that. You will get an error. So I think that's one of the good ones to call out whenever there's action required. Something I haven't gotten into yet as well, another option here is there are now the ability to query bundle components on the storefront API. So I haven't gotten too much into bundles yet on Shopify. So this idea of product bundles that get created, right? People love this idea to be able to bundle different products and stuff like that. I haven't been able to dive too deep into this, but I do know that there are some oddities here if you're trying to use bundles and you're trying to work with the Cart Ajax API. And so Storefront API then might be something that you're potentially looking at there. So as of July 1st, you can query bundle components and bundle parents on the product variant object specifically. So seems so super helpful. Like I said, I haven't dove into this at all, but I'm assuming that that's going to be very helpful for folks here in the future. And then just real quick, because I know I'm getting a little long here, I want to throw too many of these out here. But there is, as of July 1, there's a product discount function API, and it now supports cart line targeting. So something that was previously only possible with Shopify scripts, but now you can basically link discounts to specific cart lines for stuff like upsell products, free gift with purchase, stuff like that. So that's super helpful, particularly because it's not currently available right through functions, but now it's going to be updated where you can do that specific targeting on cart line items. So that seems like a big deal.
Yeah. Thanks, Taylor.
And yeah, that's it. So there's some other stuff in there that's super handy, obviously. Just check out the changelog. We'll have links in the show notes for everything that we didn't cover, too.
It's helpful to get your commentary on it, too. I appreciate it, because there's a lot in there, and to have the call-outs, I think, is helpful for folks. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I guess we should... Yeah, picks of the week. So I had a couple. The first one is a sump pit cover, which is pretty lame. So I'm going to come with the second one. All right, so if you have a sump pit, which for those of you that don't know, in some places that have basements, you have a circular pit in one area of your basement that goes a few feet down below the slab of your basement floor, and it's to collect water that comes in from either, if you don't have any drainage pipes, just from underneath the ground, but typically you would have drainage pipes that were put in place when the home was built that drain into this pit. You have a sump pump that has a flow that when the water level raises to a certain point, it triggers and it pumps the water out of the pit, out of the house, and usually into a storm drain or out to the road or somewhere to get it out of your basement. It reduces hydrostatic pressure. It helps keep your basement dry. If those things fail, it's usually bad. Anyway, they're also a big source of radon gas ingress. If you're not familiar with radon gas, it's a common gas in parts of the country that is radioactive to a degree, and believe it is number or something cause of lung cancer. Apparently, there's some debate about it, but the science seems pretty solid from what I looked at. So you don't typically want it in your house, and so you can hire a company to come out and do radon mitigation, which typically involves. Well, I'm talking about. I don't know. Anyway, long story short, so typically you want this pit to be sealed up as best as you can, because you want to prevent the gas from getting into the home in the first place. One of the ways you do that is by sealing cracks and openings from the ground into your home, because that's how it gets in. It comes up through the ground into your home. So this cover I found, I'm going to be installing it at my sump pits. I have 2 of them. Don't ask why. And it's nice because a lot of these are hard to remove once you install them if you need to do maintenance on the pump or whatever. But this one has a collar that installs around the sump pit first. It's sealed to the floor and it's screwed into the concrete. And then it has a top that you can then put on in a way that's sealed but also easy to remove, if that makes sense.
Oh, nice. Yeah, in case you have to do a repair or something like that.
And it has a little window so you can see actually what's going on in there and everything. So there's a couple There's one that's like the official one, but then this other company, Everbuilt, makes one too for less, at about $100. But radon mitigation basin cover by Everbuilt is what I'll be linking to. And then my other one is more technical in nature. So I'm a big Linux guy. I don't use it as my daily driver at this point because it was getting in the way and I just needed to make money. And my heart's still there. And DHH over at 37 Signals, the guy that pulled out the Rails framework from Basecamp, did all that stuff. He has introduced a new project. I'm sure he's collaborated with other people on it too, called Amacub. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. But it's an opinionated web developer setup for Ubuntu. So if you want to run Linux in your web developer, they've got basically a script that will install this really nice setup, all configured exactly the way they think it should be. Yeah, so it might be worth checking out.
I've seen him tweeting a bunch of stuff about his setup lately, and so that's really interesting. So that's what that all is all about, huh?
Yeah, nice. I don't know if you remember way back in the day, but his big thing, his first like big software push was TextMate. Do you remember that software?
No.
I think it was called TextMate, and it was an editor that was popular at the time that Rails came out. And one of the cool things about it was that it did some of the very first like sort of like macro fill-ins where you start typing like a Rails operative or operator, and it would automatically like fill out the rest of the block for you. And people, it was like magic at the time, right? So everyone fell in love with it.
Very cool.
Anyway, yeah, he has.
We'll have it linked up.
Thank you. All right, Taylor, what's your pick?
All right, my pick is going to be the Shopify keyboard. On the Shopify supply shop. Yeah.
It's a nice world you live in.
It is. So this was gifted by Shopify, so that was super nice. They had reached out because I had bought a bunch of stuff and tweeted about a bunch of stuff in the past or whatever, and they reached out and were like, hey, we want to send you some stuff. And so that was really nice. They sent me some stuff. I got the cool little keycap. It's on my other keyboard now. Oh, you can see that.
Nice.
But the keyboard was on pre-order at the time, and so didn't get the keyboard. I was all like, oh man, this stuff is so cool, but that keyboard looks amazing. And I had already spent a bit of money on my keyboard. Couldn't really justify just spending more money on another keyboard. Well, they sent me one, so that was super cool of them. So thank you, Shopify, for that. It is my pick of the week because it's awesome, and my wife is also super grateful because it's significantly quieter than my other keyboard. She can't hear me typing in her office now.
Nice.
So both my wife and I thank Shopify for that.
Amazing. Well, that's a cool.
Yeah. Yes.
Nice thing about those green keys on the sides is you won't be able to tell your boogers are on there when you go to type it. Sorry, I don't know why that came to mind.
We have small kids. There are boogers everywhere. That's just what it is.
All right. Well, and with that, I think we'll call it a close on episode 24. End of season 1 here of the Quick Podcast. Taylor, thanks so much. It's been a wonderful experience, and can't wait to jump back in a few weeks do it again.
All right, man. Sounds awesome. I'll see you later.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your summers.